Let us now discuss the object particle rul and ul. For the object particles, these are attached, of course, to the object of our sentence, and we use rul and ul. So we use rul when the last letter of the last syllable is actually a vowel. So for example, we have the words I in the informal form and the I in the formal or the polite form, which is na and to. Since both of them ends in a vowel, we have to add rul. So we say narul, torul. So when we want to use I as the object of our sentence, we have to add rul since it ends in a vowel. Which on the other hand, if it ends in a consonant, of course we have to add ul. For example, for the words bread and house, which in the Korean language is pang and tip, we have to add ul. So we say pangul and tipul. So again, we have rul for narul, torul, and we have ul for pangul and tipul. Let's now use our object particles in our sentence by using the subject, verb, and object structure, or if in the Korean language, the subject, object, verb structure. So for example, we have I eat rice. So of course, we have our subject, which is I, verb is eat, and object is rice. So since in the Korean language is interchanged, we have the subject first, followed by the object and the verb. We say I rice eat, right? And notice here that I already added the particles. So we have to add nun if it's the subject, and since I in the Korean language ends in a vowel, so we have to add nun. And our object is rice, which in the Korean language ends in a consonant, so we have to add ul. So we say 나는 밥을 먹다. Now let's try for the subject, the verb, and adjective structure, which in the case for Korean is only subject and adjective. So what do we have to do here? Since we don't have an object here, we don't have to worry in adding our object particles. But we have our subject, right? So we have to add topic particles. So for example, we have the sentence, I am beautiful, which have our subject, our be verb, and adjective. So the only thing that we need to add a particle to here is the subject. So in the Korean language, that will be I는 beautiful. So that will be 나는 아름답다. Let's go now to the very last particle of the day, which is the location particle. The location particle is attached to the location or time of our sentence, and we use the particle e. Let's have the very first one. For location, for example, we have the sentence, I go to school. In this sentence, school is our location. Therefore, if we use school as a location in our sentence, we have to add the location particle e. School in the Korean language is 학교. So let's attach e. So we say school에, 학교에. Next, for time, for example, we have the sentence, I eat at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock is our time here. Therefore, if we're going to use that as our time in a sentence, we have to attach e. So we have to add 10에 or 10시에. And that is our structure. Subject, location or time, and verb. Now again, let's compare English. When we use the location or time, we use this. Subject, followed by the verb, and then the location or time at the last. But for our Korean sentence, we have to use the subject first, followed by the location or time, and again, the verb comes last. So for example, we have the sentence, I go to school and I eat at 10 o'clock. So we have the subject here, our verb, and the location or time. So if we do that in the Korean sentence, that will be I school go and I 10 eat. And also, as you have noticed, I have already added our topic particle to the subject 는, our location or time particle to school and 10. And lastly, our verb. And as you may have noticed, in English, when we use location or time, we usually say it this way. I go to school. I eat at 10 o'clock. I slept on the bed. I was born in 2000. But in the Korean language, it's all the same. We use e for all of them. So here, for the first one, we have school. So we add e. What about here for eat? Of course, we have to add e to 10 o'clock. What about on the third one? So our location here is the bed. So we have to add bed e. And lastly, our time here on the last sentence is 2000. Therefore, we have to add 2000 e. So again, our structure is subject, location or time, followed by the verb. So, let's have the very first one. I go to school. I already mentioned that school is 학교, right? So we say I는 school에 go. We say 저는 학교에 가다. What about for the time? I eat at 10 o'clock. I는 10에 eat. Let's translate that. 저는 요 시에 먹다. Now let's make a sentence. Let's use all of the particles that we have learned so far. The topic, the object, and the location particles. So the structure that we're going to be using is, of course, the subject, followed by the object, the location or time, and lastly, the verb. And let's try the sentence. I eat rice at 10 o'clock. Can you try and make a sentence out of that? Once again, let us compare. In English, this is our structure. The subject comes first, followed by the verb, object next, and last is the location or time. So that is why we say, I eat rice at 10 o'clock. But in Korean, our structure is this one. Subject, object, location or time, and the verb always comes last. I have mentioned this a while ago. Therefore, we say I with the topic particle 는, rice with the object particle ul, 10 o'clock with the particle e, and lastly eat. So we say I rice 10 o'clock eat, which is when translated we say 나는 밥을 요 시에 먹다. 나는 밥을 요 시에 먹다. Now, verbs and adjectives are always placed at the end of a sentence. I don't know if you have noticed this, but our structure so far are these. We have the subject, object, verb, the subject, verb, subject, adjective, subject, location or time, verb, and subject, object, location or time, verb. So as you have noticed, all of these structures ends in either a verb or an adjective, right? So I want you to remember this. Every Korean sentence and clause must end in one of the following. It could be a verb, an adjective, or ida. You don't know what ida is yet, but you are going to learn it at the next part of the lesson. But first, let's answer the question, why is there no past, present, and future tense yet? This is a question that is asked before on the previous video. So the answer to that is there are no conjugations yet in these lessons because it is complicated for now, and we use the dictionary forms of the verbs and the adjectives. Hence, as you have noticed, our verbs and adjectives end in the. 먹다, 가다, 아름답다. right? So all of them are the dictionary forms of our verbs and adjectives. Now look at these sentences. I just want to show you how it will look like if it is conjugated, just so you know and you have something to look forward to in the future. So here, on the very first sentence, we have the unconjugated form. So it's not yet conjugated. This is what I use in this specific lesson. 저는 밥을 10시에 먹다. But what about if we try to conjugate it in the polite present tense? Therefore, we say 저는 밥을 10시에 먹어요. Next, what about in the polite past tense? 저는 밥을 10시에 먹었어요. And lastly, in the polite future tense, we say 저는 밥을 10시에 먹겠어요 or 저는 밥을 10시에 먹을 거예요. So if you don't understand how this is constructed, don't worry, I just wanted to show you so that you have something to look forward to, and this is going to be taught on the next lessons. I have mentioned that in a sentence or a clause, our sentence must either end in a verb or an adjective, or even ida. So what is ida? We are going to tackle that on the next part. It is represented by these be verbs: is, am, are, were, and was. So in English, we have different be verbs, but in the Korean language, it's just all represented by ida. Let's see, for example, these sentences. I am a woman. She is a woman. They are women. So I have mentioned a while ago that when we use adjectives in our sentences, we do not use be verbs. However, what is the difference between these sentences and sentences with an adjective? Actually, we use ida when we want to describe a noun using another noun. So women here is not an adjective. It is actually a noun, which describes I, she, and they, right? So we use the structure noun, nun, noun, ida. And actually, ida or to be is categorized under adjectives because, like adjectives, it cannot act on an object. But remember that often it is placed in their own grammatical category, distinct from both verbs and adjectives. So it's really difficult to explain, but you can just categorize it as a separate grammatical entity. So now let's try to translate these sentences. So we say, I는 woman 이다. She는 woman 이다. And they은 woman 이다. And as you can see here, am, is, and are all represent ida. Let us now try and introduce ourselves using that structure. For example, I am Mingyu. In this structure, we describe I using another noun, which is our name. So therefore, we use that structure. So we say, I는 민규이다, which represents am if translated. So why isn't it conjugated again? So I have mentioned that there are no conjugations yet in these lessons because we use the dictionary forms. But just to show you, here are the sentences in the conjugated form. So the very first one is what we use. We say, for example, 나는 민규이다. This is the unconjugated form. If we conjugate it to the informal present tense, we say 나는 민규야. What about for the polite present tense? We say 저는 민규예요. And lastly, for formal present tense, we say 저는 민규입니다. Again, in English, we have the structure noun, be verb, and noun. So for example, my name is Ashley. So I will say, I am Ashley. If we translate that, we use the structure noun,는, noun, 이다. So I say, 저는 Ashley이다. What about the sentence, I am a woman? It's the same. We just say, 저는 여자이다. Let's review all the sentence structures that we have learned today. All in all, you have learned 6 new structures, and this will be the foundation to more complex sentences in the future, so write all of these on your notes so that you won't forget. The very first 2 that we had is the subject object verb or the subject verb, for which the examples I eat rice or I sleep. The third is the subject adjective, for which we do not use be verbs, so we just say I는 beautiful or 나는 아름답다. The fourth one is the subject, location or time, and verb. And the examples for that is I go to school and I eat at 10 o'clock. The subject, object, location or time, and last is the verb, for which we use all of the particles to make our sentence much more complete. With the example, I eat rice at 7 o'clock. And lastly, we have the noun 는, noun ida, which is used to describe a noun using another noun or to introduce ourselves. So for example, your name is I am Nico, or you want to say that you are a student, you can use this structure. In order to test your comprehension, I made this. I listed all the sentence structure patterns on the left and then some sentences on the right. So what I want you to do now is to arrange these sentences and put them on the right category. I will give you 5 seconds to answer, so you can pause this video. Here are all the correct answers. So now, your next task is I want you to put the right particles to indicate which are the object, the subject, or the location or time. I will give you again 5 seconds to pause this video so that you can answer them on your own. And here are all the answers. I hope you got them all correct. And if you don't, you can just go back to the previous parts here that got you confused. I hope that has helped you, and I hope that you have learned a lot from these lessons. And for your references, here are all the translations of the sentences that we had in this practice today. And that ends our very first lesson. I hope that you learned a lot. And if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and click the notification bell to get notified about newly released videos. Annyeong!